Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our JCU webinar series with today's presentation focusing on the courses available in psychology. My name is Susan. I'm one of the future student advisors here at JCU, and I will be your host today. So let's begin with an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first inhabitants of this country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and elders, past and present, of the land on which we stand today. In the spirit of reconciliation, I also acknowledge the valuable contribution that Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples continue to make to James Cook University and the broader community. Before we begin today, I just want to go over some housekeeping. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel, and I will address these with our speakers as they arise. If we run out of time to answer your question or we don't get anyone answering it in the chat, we can always email you a response after the presentation. So let's start by looking at our presenters this afternoon. So of course there's me, and then we also have Dr. Brian Law, who is originally from Singapore. Brian is a lecturer of psychology at James Cook University and member of the Psychology of Active Healthy Living group. In addition to being the subject coordinator for the Psychology of Health, Wellbeing and Resilience, he is also the academic advisor of the Graduate Diploma of Psychology, Bridging, and a fourth-year lecturer in our psychology programs. Brian has a keen research interest in issues relating to digital health and intervention programs that benefit community health in general. We also have Dr. Emily Adam, who is a psychology lecturer, researcher, and registered psychologist. Emily is the course coordinator for the Master of Professional Psychology degree here at JCU. And lastly, but not least, is Lachlan Stewart. He is one of our psychology students here at JCU and is also the Queensland General Manager for State Government and Health Sectors for one of Australia's largest technology companies. He works 55 plus hours a week, has completed the JCU Graduate Diploma in Psychology Bridging last year, and has been accepted into the Honours Program part-time starting the next year. Before we get to our speakers, I want to quickly go over some of our pathways here at JCU. So while we are also talking to postgraduate, we have some undergraduate courses we're discussing as well. So it's always useful to know ways in which you can access university. So the ones on your screen you can see are JCU Prep, the diploma pathways, and the Certificate of Higher Education. I'm going to focus on JCU Prep, and I know that Dr. Brian Law will talk a little bit more about the diploma in his section of the presentation. So what is JCU Prep? So JCU Prep allows you to build a personalised pathway and develop your study skills. It's a flexible preparatory program that allows you to build the skills and knowledge needed to be successful at university study, while also meeting entry requirements for a range of bachelor's degrees. So the study pathway you build in JCU Prep will be tailored towards your needs. All the subjects are free. However, you will need to pay a student services and amenities fee. You can apply online or on campus in Townsville and Cairns, and there are 3 intakes per year, which start in January, May, or September. A choice of subjects you enrol in will be dependent on your individual circumstances. All subjects are available every trimester, and most are available in both Townsville and Cairns or online. Recommendations regarding subjects will depend on the individual. So you can see on your screen there are 8 subjects that you can choose from. You can do as many or as little as you want, depending on what you need for the course that you are interested in. You will need at least 2 subjects to receive a ranking, and rankings are based on your grade point average. For example, if you pass 4 JCU Prep subjects, you will have an equivalent ranking of an ATAR 70. To be eligible for JCU Prep, you need to be 18 years or older and an Australian citizen. You can apply directly through JCU at the website shown on the screen. And if you are unsure which of the JCU prep subjects are right for you based on your circumstances, you can speak to a JCU Pathways advisor who'll be happy to assist. So let me now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Brian Law, who is going to talk about the Graduate Diploma in Psychology. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. So my name is Brian, and I'll be talking about the bridging program. Just a little bit more about myself. So as Susan has mentioned, I coordinate the health psychology subject in the course, and I'm also the academic advisor for the bridging program. Now, aside from that, I'm also the academic advisor for our fourth-year programs at JCU for psychology. A little bit more about my research interests. Susan kind of mentioned it, but currently I am quite interested in health intervention programs in general. But right now, what I'm really interested in is online student well-being. Surprise, surprise, given that I teach in that space, and other topics relating to digital health. So next, I will talk a little bit more about the actual program. So this program is a bridging program. What this means is you'll need to have completed an undergraduate degree in another field. The program will be a 3-year undergraduate equivalent, and it is APAC accredited, APAC being the accreditation body for psychology courses in Australia. Now, the course consists of 10 subjects, and you can actually complete it within 20 months. You can do, because the course is online, you can basically do the course from anywhere. And you have a lot of flexibility with the program as well in how you actually complete it. You have a maximum time of 52 months to actually complete the graduate diploma bridging, which is about 4 years-ish. And you can take a maximum leave of absence of up to 12 months. So you do have quite a bit of freedom there. We run 6 study periods in a year. And in the next slide, you'll see that we actually run it in a bit of a carousel model, which means that you can enter the program in basically one of 6 time points within the year. And because of that, you essentially can pick which subject you want to start off with. So you get a little bit of choice there. Now, the next slide shows you the typical pathway for a undergraduate psychology program. So you do a 3-year undergraduate degree, and then followed by your 4th year, whether that's an honors or graduate diploma, followed by then the master's or PhD pathway. Now, in the next slide, you'll see as I mentioned before, the diploma bridging program is equivalent to the 3-year undergraduate study for psychology. So after you've done this, if you want to continue your pathway in psychology, then you can, of course, go on to the 4th year. And if you still you think that psychology is for you, then you can go on to master's or a PhD. Next slide, please. So who is this program for? This is actually really for people who are considering maybe a career in psychology and wanting to pursue a pathway to become a registered psychologist. Next. It could be for people who are looking to upskill themselves for their current work. So for example, we have teachers who have joined the course to learn and apply psychology knowledge to their own work. Next, you could be pursuing psychology purely because you have an interest in psychology, the field, and we do hope that that's the case for all our students. So these are kind of the 3 groups of people who might come into the program. Now, if you look at the next slide, which is really quick. Yeah, so currently these are talking a little bit more about our current students. You'll see that majority of our students are actually 40 years old and above, which is quite different from the usual undergraduate demographic. Next, you will see that majority of our students are actually enrolled part-time rather than full-time. And part of the reason for that is because they have multiple commitments, such as obviously family and work, which might be quite similar to your situation as well. Next, we have students who are enrolled in both quite a bit of students in the regional and metro areas, and that's because of the online nature, which allows that access. Next, because it is online, we do have a proportion of students who are based internationally, such as places such as Singapore, Saudi Arabia, and Africa. What this means, though, is that during tutorials, which we call collaborate sessions, the sharing is very, very rich because students come from various backgrounds and experience. So this is quite different from what you might have experienced in undergraduate, in your own undergraduate course. So in the next slide, you'll see the subjects that are covered within the course. And next, you actually see that if you complete the 10 subjects, of course, you'll finish off with the graduate diploma. But for any reason, if you need to pull out of the course because of change in your circumstances, but you've already completed 4 of the subjects, you can actually exit with a graduate certificate. So it's something to keep in mind just in case life happens and you need to exit the course. Next slide. Yep. So why choose us? The content for the program has been developed based on the latest emerging trends and topics in psychology. So to the extent it's designed for future, the assessments go beyond the traditional assessments. Yes, we still do have the typical lit reviews and essays, but we have more applied assessments as well. So for example, in the subject I teach, I get students to complete a health intervention proposal, which is something quite different from the normal assessments that you might have completed before. We have unique subject offerings as well. Back a slide, please. Yeah, we have unique subject offerings such as environmental psychology as well. And that's one of the subjects that have been garnered a lot of interest. I've already talked about how the program is 100% online, accelerated, and flexible. So I won't talk about that again. But what I really wanted to touch on was throughout the course, you do get quite a bit of support, not just from the teaching staff, but you get access to other supports like student success advisors, who you can book consultation with one-to-one, and they can actually help you to develop your study plan. So you get that support not just at the start of the course, but all throughout the entire program. Now, the final slide talks a little bit more about entry requirements. And if you're interested in finding a little bit more about the different subjects within the course, you can scan the QR code on the left, which gives you the list of subjects, which you can read a little bit more about the assessments, the content. If you're interested in more information about the program itself, then you can scan the QR code on the right, and also application information can be found there as well. So that's pretty much all I have. Thank you so much. And I'll hand back over to Susan.
Thank you, Brian. That was very informative. So what we'll do now is I will pass over to Dr. Emily Adam, who is going to talk more about our master program. Emily?
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. So to begin, I will step you through the pathways to registration. So I'm going to take a wild guess and sort of estimate that most of you would like to go on to become a psychologist, given that you're here to hear about psychology courses. So I'm just going to spend some time taking you through the pathways to becoming a psychologist, because this is a question I get asked often. And once I've done that, I will then step you through the 2 master's programs that we offer at JCU. So you can see here, to begin with, we've got the undergraduate pathways. And Brian has just been speaking to the 3-year undergraduate sequence or 3-year bridging program. And this is essentially what we call a level 1 competency course. So this gives you your level 1 competencies in psychology, which you would then progress on to level 2 competencies. And this is a 4th year of study. So this is either a standalone 4th year. It can be packaged at some universities in a 4-year sequence. And there are some universities that have 4th and 5th year sequences packaged together. But essentially, the pathway is always that you will do a 3-year sequence or equivalent, then a 4th year of training. And then once you've done that 4th year of training, you are then eligible to register as a provisional psychologist, provided that you are enrolled in further education. So you can see over here, there's the 4+2 internship. This pathway has been retired. So you can see here, it was retired on the 30th of June, 2022. So this pathway is currently in, I guess, like the teach out stage, if you like, with those who are currently in the 4+2 internship needing to apply for general registration by the 30th of June, 2027. And so that brings us to the pathways that we have available for those who are entering psychology study now and would like to go on to become a psychologist or a researcher. So I'll step you through those two sort of pathways. So we have an option here which replaces the 4+2 internship, and it's a 5+1 internship. So what that means is that you would do a 5th year of study at the master's level, and then you would do 1 year of supervised practice in an internship. Once you finish that 1 year of supervised practice, so 2 years altogether, you then complete the National Psychology exam. At JCU, we have a course called the Master of Professional Psychology program, and that program is a 5+1 program. So once you've completed your 3-year bridging program or equivalent, you've completed your 4th year of study, you could then enroll into the Master of Professional Psychology. You'll do your 1 year of study at JCU, and it involves a semester of coursework. So it's taught in the traditional semester format with a mid-year entry. And in the first semester, you have coursework. And then in the second semester, you have placement in the JCU Psychology Clinic. Once you've completed that 1 year of study in that master's program, you then graduate from JCU, and you then begin that 1 year of supervised practice. At the completion of that 1 year of supervised practice, you would sit an exam through the Psychology Board of Australia, and on successful completion of that exam, you can then apply for general registration with the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. Now, the other master's program that we have at JCU sits over here in this column, and it is a Master of Psychology Clinical. And this is a 2-year program. So the Master of Psychology Clinical at JCU provides all of the internship that you would do in your intern year outside of the university. It provides it within placements that are supervised by the university. And you essentially do all of your assessment towards competency within the program. So you don't need to sit the National Psychology exam if you do the 2-year master's program. So a 1-year master's program, a 2-year master's program, there is an important difference between these two programs as well. Whilst they both lead to general registration on completion, with the master's degree in clinical psychology, you will then be eligible to apply for a registrar program in an area of practice endorsement, which I'll talk about later. But essentially, with this program, the 5+1, so the Master of Professional Psychology, you won't be able to go into an area of practice endorsement unless you do further study within an area of practice endorsement. You can only register as a generally registered psychologist. So I'm sure you've all heard about clinical psychologists and neuropsychologists and educational and developmental psychologists, sports psychologists, counseling psychologists, forensic psychologists. So there are a range of areas of practice endorsement within psychology. In order to be eligible to apply for a registrar program in one of those areas, you have to complete a 2-year master's program in that area. The other options towards general registration are a combined master's PhD or a professional doctorate, and we don't have these two pathways at JCU. We have the focus on the master's training. For those of you who are interested in doing a longer degree, they are 4 years, a combined master's and PhD or a professional doctorate, and they lead to level 3 to level 4 competencies within psychology and general registration. So moving on to talk about these areas of practice endorsement, you can see here, if you do a 5+1 program, you could later on go on to do a degree that is a standalone degree within that area of practice endorsement. So there are programs that do offer like a 1-year master's program in an area of practice endorsement that you could do on top of your Master of Professional Psychology. You would then complete 300 hours of a registrar program, and then you would have general registration plus an area of practice endorsement. So if you did a standalone master's in clinical psychology to that level 4 competency, you would then be eligible to enter into a registrar program. If you do the 2-year master's program, within, say, clinical psychology at JCU, on completion of that master's program, you can then enter into a registrar program of 3,000 hours, which you will complete while you practice. It's approximately 2 years, across 2 years that you would do this. And on completion of that registrar program, you could then move into general registration in an area of practice endorsement. So the differences between the Master of Professional Psychology at JCU and the Master of Clinical Psychology at JCU is that in the Master of Professional Psychology, you just do 1 year of study at JCU, then you do a 1-year internship where you'll be getting paid. So that's a really important point to make. You'll be getting paid when you do that internship. Whereas when you do the master's program, the 2-year master's program, your placements are not paid. So you complete placement as a student across a 2-year degree. And then on completion, you can then apply for a registrar program of 3,000 hours to build competency within your area of practice endorsement. So that might be clinical psychology. And that's actually currently what I'm completing. So I'm 2 months off finishing my registrar program, and I will then be a clinical psychologist rather than a psychologist. So they're the pathways we have at JCU. Both of them are on campus, but the Master of Professional Psychology program has more flexible study in the first semester, where a lot of the content is presented online for the first 9 weeks. But with both of those programs, there is a placement across like 15 to 16 weeks in the JCU Psychology Clinic in Townsville. So important to flag that. And I'm sure I'll have lots of questions at the end, but that's it for me now. And over to Susan.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, our last presenter for today is going to be Lachlan Stewart, who is one of our students here at JCU, currently studying psychology. Lachlan?
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. So if we could just go to the next slide. Yep. So a little bit about me and how I got to here. I was born in Adelaide and grew up, had an unusual childhood. So I grew up in Tripoli, Libya. Then my father moved to Lagos, Nigeria. Then he moved to Westport, Connecticut. And we ended up in Dallas, Texas before returning to Adelaide when I was 16, where I completed my year 11 and 12. I currently live in Brisbane with my wife and 3 children. I have undergraduate degrees in science and business and 2 graduate diplomas, 1 in applied finance, and the most recently, this graduate psychology bridging course, which I'll talk about in a minute. I currently work in the IT industry focused on government and health customers. And so on the next slide, you'll see the decisions I took to actually do this course. So unfortunately, one of my children needed a lot of help. He was suffering from anxiety. It would escalate to depression. and some further darker thoughts. So I needed to get in front of that. So each year I get a graduate intake in my job, and so I asked some of the graduates to do some research of all the psychology courses in Australia, which was a bit naughty, but did it anyway. And we shortlisted 3. And when we reviewed the 3, JCU came out on top. And the reason why JCU came out on top is that what appealed to me were the 6-week units, and that I could complete the course in less than 2 years, which, given that I'm approaching the wrong side of 50, that was important to me. Secondly, the course was online. It was Queensland-based, go Queenslander, and it had a very strong reputation. So if we go to the next slide, I'll tell you what it was like. So first of all, I really liked the 10 topics they selected. They were really interesting. They were well-rounded. They were contemporary. I learned so much about Aboriginal studies and issues, which I didn't have an appreciation for before doing the course. And I found that there's a bit of a typo there, but the structure of each unit consisted of two assignments and some short online multiple choice exams, which suited me down to the ground. In terms of fitting it in with work-life balance, I found the course extremely flexible, and that was another big tick. Because my job demands a lot of my time, in the first year I decided to do 5 subjects instead of 6, and the flexibility was there, and they said no worries. And then in the second year I did the second 5 rather than 4. So that flexibility was really appealing. And as I said, the overall structure and topics were amazing. So after doing the course, the outcomes, fast forward 2 years, my son is doing much better and is currently studying law. I find that, and this, I didn't really plan on this, that I find that in my day-to-day job, where I have to deal with a lot of people, it's made me a much better people manager, because often I can see or understand why people are behaving a certain way, and sometimes those behaviours need to be modified, and there's a much softer way of going about it. So I've appreciated that. And for me, the good news is I've been accepted into the honours program. So that was my experience studying this course, which I can't say enough good things about it. So thank you, and I wish you the best if you decide to go forward. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very useful information for our attendees this afternoon. So I'm going to take the next 10-15 minutes to actually go through any questions that any of our attendees have. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask either Brian, Emily, or Lachlan, please feel free to type that into the chat down the bottom. I do have a question that's just come through. So Emily, I'm just going to ask you this question. What is the difference between a psychologist and a clinical psychologist?
So a clinical psychologist has additional training in the area of clinical psychology, which you can think of as working at the more complex end of mental health. So you'll often find clinical psychologists working with complex presentations in hospital settings, and with more sort of like complex mental health conditions. So the role of a clinical psychologist is around the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of mental health conditions. The training is specifically focused on those areas. So if you think about assessment in the space of neurodevelopmental conditions like autism. Clinical psychologists are recognised as being one of the roles alongside a paediatrician or medical doctor, and being able to diagnose those for NDIS purposes. So the training is more focused on what we might call the pointy end of mental health work. And that's what essentially clinical psychology is. Whereas generally registered psychologists work across a broad range of presentations, from those sort of on the lower end of severity and complexity. They can work with complex clients too, but the training for a clinical psychologist is specifically within that more complex or severe presentation. Hopefully that answers it.
Thank you. I am going to stick with you, Emily, and I did have one question about placement. So with placement, the internships and the placement you talked about in the Masters, do students need to organise that for themselves, or does the university do that for them? So who organises the placement and where students are going?
So within the Master of Professional Psychology, the 1-year program, there is only one placement, and it is in the JCU Psychology Clinic here in Townsville. For the Master of Clinical Psychology program, you'll complete 3 placements, the first of which will be in the JCU Psychology Clinic here in Townsville, and the other 2 you'll have some choice and selection for where you'll do placement. You'll generally be required to interview for those placements. So some places that you can do placement are within Queensland Health. I did placement at Open Arms, working with veterans and their families, and current serving members and their families. There are regional, rural and remote placements that you can do as part of the Master of Clinical Psychology. So you'll have essentially some choice with respect to where you'd like to do placement when you do the Master of Clinical Psychology. Coming back to the Master of Professional Psychology, which is just that 1-year degree with just 1 placement, you will be required to do an internship, which is essentially paid work that's supervised, where you'll work towards developing those level 3 competencies within psychology. For those internships, you will source those yourself. So it's just like applying for a job. You'll see, you go to Seek and type in provisional psychologist into Seek, it will come up with jobs for provisional psychologists, and that would be a type of role that you applied for. That answers it.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. There was a follow-up question as well. With those placements, is there support for those who have to move to do it? So a lot of this stuff is online, but if they have to do placements in Townsville, do we offer any support or accommodation for students who need to move here to do those?
No, so both of these degrees are on campus. So they are both on-campus programs, so they're not online programs. So on-campus attendance is required. So if you are interested in applying for either of those programs, it is important to know that they are both on campus, and the expectation is that you will be in Townsville to complete those. Yeah. And people do relocate because master's programs are traditionally competitive in terms of the application and admission process. And so people do travel from across Australia to complete master's programs.
Excellent. Thank you. Lachlan, I'm going to ask you the next question. What's your biggest tip for someone who's thinking about coming back to do study?
My biggest concern was I hadn't studied for a long time, and I'm not the best writer in the world. And what I found is that these sort of support services that the university provides are extensive. So there were a lot of guides on how to write, which was important to me. And you could also submit your, which I didn't do, but you could submit your assignments and have them reviewed before submitting your assignments for marking. I allocated around 8 hours of reading a week. And then for the assignments, I knew that if I did 20 hours on the assignments, I'd get a pass. If I invested 30 hours on the assignments, I'd get a credit. And if I invested close to 40 hours on assignments, I'd get a distinction. And so the lesson there is that effort. If you want a good mark, then you do have to put in the time. But the way the online material is presented, it's very interactive, it's dynamic, it's interesting. It's not a case of just the old days where you just read a textbook and it goes on and on and on, and you're basically falling asleep before the end of the chapter. So that was my experience.
Thank you. I do have another question that's come through, and I might leave it to Brian or Emily to choose who answers this. Are there any pathways into neuroscience at JCU?
I'm happy to answer this one, but not for practice endorsement. So not for being a neuropsychologist. There are other universities in Australia who that is their sort of training specialty, and those universities are down south. But there's no reason that if you're interested in neuroscience, we do cover neuroscience in the foundational psychology courses. So you will have an introduction to neuroscience, and there's no reason you couldn't go down a PhD pathway and become a neuroscientist through the psychology sort of pathway there. So we do teach it, but there is no specific program for being a neuropsychologist. But if you want to be a scientist, PhD is the pathway for you. And we do have those at JCU.
Amazing, thank you. Brian, I'm going to ask you the next question. So you mentioned supports in your section of the presentation. So what support measures are in place for students? So what specific supports can they access?
So I think there's a lot of support at JCU. So we do, like I mentioned, we do have the SSAs for the bridging course. We do have obviously the Learning Center as well, which is a really, really good resource for students coming back into study. And Lachlan could probably attest to this as well. You've got access to librarians as well, which helps you for those who are, I guess, newer to, searching for, using OneSearch, newer platforms that you need to access to complete assessments. You can go through there. One of the biggest challenges that a lot of students encounter is APA formatting, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. So librarians are actually really, really good with that. You can, again, book time with them and they can run through step by step how to do it. I believe there are webinars for them as well. So those, I think there's the Wellbeing Center as well. So if you do struggle with whether it's study or things that happen at home, you can access them as well. So those are just a few that I can think off the top of my head, but there are actually quite a few more. Lachlan, if you can think of any that you might have access, you can jump in. But yeah, I think those are the main ones.
Amazing. And I will also stick with you, Brian, just with the carousel model. So you talked about the carousel model in the grad diploma.
Yep.
What's generally the structure of those 6-week courses, and how much time would you expect students to be dedicating to study each week, say, in those courses?
So I think Lachlan kind of talked a little bit about this, but generally what happens is it's a 6 weeks teaching, but the actual study period is about 8 weeks. So you get orientation week first. So once you come in, you have that orientation week. We do a meet and greet during the first orientation week. So you get to know, the subject coordinator, a little bit about your peers as well. So that first week when you come in, you do get a lot of support in the sense that the SSAs actually reach out to you as well for new students and tell you how to navigate, how to plan your studies and things like that. So the first week is really, as it says, it's orientation. So you get the chance to navigate around the Blackboard system, which is what we use at JCU, and get really familiar with the space. Then it's 6 weeks of content, and we release content usually ahead of time so students can plan their studies. So say, in week 4 of a study period, you're going to be quite busy, so you can actually plan and do, more studies ahead of time. to kind of compensate for that. Now, after the 6 weeks, week 7, usually there might be an assessment that's still early in the week, but it's a non-teaching week. So basically, you get a bit of a break before you go on to the next study period. Between some study periods, there might be a week break, but otherwise it might be just back to back. So after week 7, you might be straight on to a week for the next study period already. So some of them can be quite tight. So that's generally the structure for the grad dip programs. I hope I answered that.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I might just move on. So we've actually, no, I've got, no. So I might just move on. So thank you everyone today for helping answer some of those questions about our psychology degree here at JCU. Before we finish up today, I do want to briefly mention our JCU Careers and Employability team. So these guys offer support for students who are looking at planning or trying to make a decision about their career. And they offer individual appointments in person, via phone, or via Zoom. So if you are interested in psychology and you might have some more questions, you can always make an appointment with the Careers and Employability team. So you can see that there is an email address as well as a web address that you can follow, or alternately, you can go follow that QR code that's on your screen, and they would be happy to help you with anything that you are wanting to know about. I also have here upcoming webinars. So tomorrow we have an education webinar going on at lunchtime, which is similar to the format we've done today. And we have a postgrad information evening coming up. We have one in Cairns on Tuesday the 21st and one in Townsville on the 23rd of November. And Dr. Emily Adam is actually attending those. So if you do have more questions about postgraduate degrees or master courses that we have, you can ask her at that event. If you'd like to register for either of those, you can follow that QR code to our events page, and you can get some more information on that. I'd like to finish up by thanking everyone for attending today, and especially our presenters. You did a wonderful job, and I've definitely learned plenty today from hearing about your courses. I'd also like to ask the audience to complete a little post survey tonight, this afternoon, sorry. So when the webinar closes, you'll see a little link open up in your browser. And if you don't mind, we would really love it if you could give us a little bit of feedback on the presentation today. You can also check out our previous webinars, since we've done 3 this week already, if you want to know more about other subjects. There's also a mature student and a pathways webinar that you're welcome to watch, which will also have lots of information for you. Again, I would like to thank everyone for attending. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and I hope that we see you soon at JCU.